The early 20th century saw Japan emerge as a major power in Asia. This period was marked by rapid industrialization and modernization, transforming Japan from a feudal society into a formidable industrial and military power. The Meiji Restoration had set the stage for this transformation, and by the 1900s, Japan was eager to expand its influence and secure resources to fuel its growing economy. Its growing ambitions, however, clashed with the interests of the United States, especially in resource-rich regions like China. The US had significant economic and strategic interests in China, and Japan's expansionist policies threatened these interests. The tension between the two nations began to escalate as Japan sought to dominate East Asia, while the US aimed to maintain its influence in the region. Japan's aggressive expansionist policies, including its invasion of Manchuria in 1931, further fueled tensions. The invasion was a clear demonstration of Japan's military might and its willingness to use force to achieve its goals. This move was condemned by the League of Nations, but Japan withdrew from the League, signaling its defiance and determination to pursue its ambitions regardless of international opinion. The United States responded with economic sanctions, hoping to curb Japan's military expansion. These sanctions targeted vital resources such as oil and steel, which were crucial for Japan's war machine. The US believed that by cutting off these supplies, it could pressure Japan into abandoning its aggressive policies. These sanctions, however, had the opposite effect, pushing Japan closer to the brink of war. Instead of deterring Japan, the sanctions made the Japanese leadership more determined to secure the resources they needed by any means necessary. This led to increased militarization and preparations for a potential conflict with the United States. Japan saw the United States' actions as a threat to its survival and its goal of establishing a greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere. This concept was promoted as a way to liberate Asian countries from Western colonial rule, but in reality, it was a guise for Japanese domination. Propaganda efforts were ramped up to garner public support for the government's expansionist policies. Diplomatic efforts to avert war ultimately failed. Despite numerous negotiations and attempts to find a peaceful resolution, neither side was willing to compromise on their core interests. The breakdown in diplomacy made war seem inevitable, as both nations prepared for the worst. Japan, feeling cornered and desperate, decided on a surprise attack against the United States Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. This bold and risky move was intended to cripple the US naval power in the Pacific, giving Japan the upper hand in the ensuing conflict. The attack on Pearl Harbor would become a pivotal moment in history, marking the beginning of the Pacific War and drawing the United States into World War II. On December 7, 1941, Japanese aircraft launched from carriers struck Pearl Harbor. The surprise attack devastated the United States Pacific Fleet, sinking or damaging numerous battleships and aircraft. Over 2,400 Americans were killed, and the nation was plunged into World War II. The attack on Pearl Harbor had a profound impact on the United States. It unified the nation against Japan and galvanized public support for the war effort. The date, which will live in infamy, as President Franklin D. Roosevelt declared, marked a turning point in American history. 6 months after Pearl Harbor, the Battle of Midway proved to be a decisive turning point in the Pacific War. United States codebreakers had intercepted Japanese plans to attack the strategically important Midway Atoll. This intelligence allowed the United States Navy to lay a trap for the Japanese fleet. The resulting battle was a disaster for Japan. 4 Japanese aircraft carriers were sunk, crippling their naval air power. The Battle of Midway marked the beginning of the end of Japan's offensive operations in the Pacific. Following Midway, the United States adopted a strategy of island hopping to advance towards the Japanese mainland. This involved capturing key islands, establishing air bases, and using them to launch further attacks. The campaign was long and brutal, marked by fierce fighting on both sides. Battles like Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa saw some of the most intense fighting of the war. The Japanese defenders fought tenaciously, often to the last man. The human cost on both sides was staggering. Section 5. The Atomic Bomb, a controversial end to the war. By 1945, Japan was on the verge of defeat. The relentless Allied bombing campaigns had left many Japanese cities in ruins, and the Japanese military was struggling to maintain its defensive positions across the Pacific. Despite these dire circumstances, the Japanese leadership remained steadfast in their refusal to surrender unconditionally. However, the Japanese leadership refused to surrender unconditionally, as demanded by the Allies. The Allies, led by the United States, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union, were determined to bring the war to a swift and decisive end. They issued the Potsdam Declaration, calling for Japan's immediate and unconditional surrender, but the Japanese government rejected it. Facing the prospect of a costly invasion of Japan, President Harry Truman made the fateful decision to use atomic bombs. The decision was influenced by the desire to avoid a prolonged and bloody ground invasion, which was estimated to result in hundreds of thousands of casualties on both sides. Truman and his advisors believed that the shock and awe of the atomic bomb would force Japan to surrender. On August 6, 1945, an atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, instantly killing tens of thousands. The bomb, nicknamed Little Boy, caused unprecedented destruction, leveling the city and causing immense human suffering. The immediate death toll was staggering, and many more would die in the following days and weeks from injuries and radiation exposure. 3 days later, another bomb devastated Nagasaki. The second bomb, called Fat Man, was dropped on August 9, causing similar devastation and loss of life. The cumulative effect of the two bombings was overwhelming, and the Japanese government was left with no choice but to reconsider their position. The horrific destruction and loss of life forced Japan to surrender on August 15, 1945, ending World War II. The formal surrender ceremony took place on September 2 aboard the USS Missouri, marking the end of one of the deadliest conflicts in human history. The use of atomic bombs remains a deeply controversial decision, sparking debates about the ethics and necessity of such a devastating weapon. Section 6. The Aftermath. Japan in ruins. The war left Japan in ruins. Its cities were devastated by bombing, its economy was shattered, and its people were suffering. The country was occupied by the United States, and its government and society underwent a period of profound transformation. The war crimes trials held after the war led to the execution or imprisonment of many Japanese leaders. Emperor Hirohito, however, remained on the throne, albeit as a figurehead with no political power. Section 7. A New Japan Transformation and Recovery. Under the American occupation, Japan underwent a remarkable transformation. A new constitution was adopted, transforming Japan into a democratic nation. Economic reforms helped to rebuild the country's industrial base, paving the way for its post-war economic miracle. Japan renounced war and focused on peaceful development, becoming a close ally of the United States. The country's economy grew rapidly, and it soon emerged as a global leader in technology and manufacturing. Section 8. The United States. A global superpower emerges. The United States emerged from World War II as a global superpower. The war had a profound impact on American society, boosting its economy and its international standing. The U.S. played a leading role in shaping the post-war world order. The war also had a lasting impact on American culture and identity. The experiences of World War II shaped a generation and left an indelible mark on the nation's psyche.